to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, March 24th, 2016, getting to the end of the week, coming up on Easter and Purim and various other holidays and stuff. And we have got lots and lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. John is sitting in our control room today, hand hovering over the telephone, ready to swoop on down and put you on the air with your comments and questions here. Top story continues to be what happened in Brussels and its aftermath. And we're now seeing videos coming on out, real genuine videos, not recycled from Russia in 2011, which is what they were doing yesterday. But we're seeing actual videos shot just moments after the attacks in the metro station and at the airport. And the first thing that comes to mind to me is that is way too much damage to be explainable by a so-called suicide vest. Because if you look at the security camera pictures of the guys we're being told did this, if they're wearing explosive vests, they're very, very, very thin. And there's kind of a funny thing about explosives. If you flatten them out into thin panels, they're nowhere near as effective as a properly tamped charge. Now, there are supposedly 4 Americans still unaccounted for who are known to be in Brussels. They're still trying to find them. And meanwhile, we're seeing more and more articles all over the independent media. Nobody's buying the official story. A story that came out of activist posts, possible signs of false flag in Brussels now emerging. And they're talking about how once again the patsies were known to the authorities. Oh, there were warnings. We knew there was going to be an attack on them. In fact, in this case, they're saying they specifically knew it was going to be the airport in the next few days, and yet no enhanced security was done. It's all done after the fact. And no public warning was issued. They need lots of blood to push their agenda. We're hearing that apparently the night before, there was an altercation between police and Middle Eastern-looking men, and this is very reminiscent of these people who were causing a ruckus in New York on Manhattan near the World Trade Towers the night before 9/11, and they were going on in there and they were screaming about how America was going to learn a lesson and, Allah was great, and then they conveniently left their ID on the bar so it could be found the next day and point the finger of blame where it was supposed to go. We're also finding out that apparently one of George Soros' groups had a meeting in Brussels just the day before the attack. So all kinds of questionable connections. Now, not too surprisingly, of course, ministers at the European Union are demanding more data access after the Brussels attack. We have to spy on everything. We could have stopped this if only we'd been allowed to look at your Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie recipe. And anytime there's a blast or killing or anything, politicians, they don't think about how to fix the problem. They don't even think about how to take care of the victims. It's always, how can I use this to push the agenda? And the agenda is total secrecy for the government and absolutely no privacy whatsoever for ordinary people, because they're scared of you. They're scared of you. There's another article out here, and this came out of Russia Today, about how armed police are now out in force across Europe in the wake of the Brussels attack. They're a little late, aren't they? They've got these militarized police out there standing in the airports looking grim. How about they should have been at the airport after the intelligence services said that something was going to happen? Something kind of a little odd now. Following every attack, anywhere, and I use the word attack loosely because I'm one of those who thinks this was another staged false flag attack. Security is increased and freedom curtailed. Then there's always another attack. And then they ask for more security and more limits on your freedom and privacy. Then there's another attack, and they scream, we need even more security, and we need to invade your privacy even more. Maybe it's time to try something different. Because from where I sit right now, I'm getting ready to change that coffee mug we have in our store and change the quote to, the fastest way to end terrorism is for governments to stop hiring terrorists as tools of policy. Because we know that's what's going on. It's all over the planet that the U.S. encouraged the rise of Al-Qaeda and ISIS as tools to reshape the Middle East, to get Bashar al-Assad. Everybody knows it. And all those members of the government and the corporate media standing up there and saying, oh yes, ISIS is really bad. They're looking really foolish. You know, and I have to admire their resilience and their dedication. You know, but if at first you don't succeed, try again, then quit, because otherwise you're looking foolish. Now, we are hearing that the Brussels bombers did have a plan to attack the nuclear power station. And police are claiming to have uncovered 12 hours of footage the jihadists filmed outside a plant director's home. And already this is smelling funny. Who needs 12 hours of footage to case a home? A couple of good still pictures and you're done. 12 hours of footage? It's like they were standing there with a camera saying, come on, catch us, you know, see us filming your home. And there's another aspect of this, because I don't think Brussels is the end of it. I think we're going to be seeing an escalation of these all over Europe and here in America to remind us we must be scared of ISIS, to remind us of why we must depend on the government, why we need the government and we owe them our money and our obedience. It's like that wonderful quote at the end of V for Vendetta. But it occurs to me that there may be another agenda at work here, because right now the U.S. government is facing severe criticism for allowing the U.S. infrastructure to just collapse. Toxic tap water, Gulf oil disaster, Hanford, WIP. And now, of course, we have 2 nuclear reactors, one in New York and one in Florida. They're leaking radiation. And everybody's saying, what are you doing? Why aren't you taking care of this country? Now, if some terrorists, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, were to attack those reactors, then the leaks can be blamed on the terrorists, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. And then the government's off the hook. And Coulter will remind us all that a little radiation is actually good for us. Now, everybody is nervous after these attacks, those who believe the official story, and even those of us who know it's a false flag, because there's going to be more of these false flags. Story out of RINF.com, London has the jitters after the Brussels attack. And, of course, everybody in the British government is trying to use this to push their agenda. David Cameron and his people are out there saying, see, we have to stay glued to the European Union. Only the European Union can protect us. This from what was once the mightiest empire on the planet. And, of course, the people who want a Brexit are out there saying, no, if we cut off from Europe, we'll be more secure, because there will be border controls at that tunnel going underneath the channel and at all the ports. And we just won't have this flood of refugees coming on in, which everybody is now acknowledging is how these terrorists get sent into these countries. Even the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, is saying quitting the European Union will make Britain safer, would make it easier to deport the terrorists and control the borders and filter who comes in. And, of course, here in the United States, all of the presidential candidates who are opposed to Donald Trump are dealing with the reality that the Brussels attack has vindicated his comments about securing our borders. And they're trying to spin it as, oh, it's a wall, it's a racism, he wants a wall across Mexico. Really? What about that wall that Israel's building? Oh, no, well, that's different. That's Israel. Israel has a right to have walls and apartheid, but here in America, we're not supposed to have that. So everybody's thrashing around. The stories are contradicting each other, and that's why the propaganda campaign is failing. Because for propaganda to work, it must present a self-consistent, believable alternative reality with which to replace the real world. And this propaganda campaign doesn't, because it's been designed by advertising executives and public relations people who aren't used to thinking in terms of bamboozling an audience for year on end. It's 30 seconds, 60 seconds, maybe a 2 to 3 week sales campaign. Then it's all thrown out and they start all over again and come up with something else. Doesn't matter if it conflicts for TV advertising and PR. It does undermine the believability of propaganda. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the terror attacks / false flag up in Brussels. And, of course, the world is expressing tremendous sympathy for the victims and their families who were killed and injured. And it's a terrible, terrible tragedy. Unless you're in Israel, they seem to have a different attitude. And looking at Israeli social media, we're seeing a lot of comments. Quote, I'm kind of glad it happened so the world understands what we go through every day. Amen that none of ours got injured, end quote. Remember Netanyahu right after 9/11? When he was asked, what do you think of it? He says, oh, it's a good thing. No, it'll build sympathy for Israel. And I challenge that thing, what Israel goes through every day. Nobody has flown planes into skyscrapers in Israel. Nobody's blown up the airport or train station. What Israel holds up as their existential threat are these homemade bottle rockets that always seem to hit empty lots, just as Israel's getting ready to uncork on Gaza yet again. Another quote from the Israeli social media. Let them blow up. Do they care about us? Let them feel what we have here. These Europeans are anti-Semitic scum. Your brother, let's send breaking the silence to Belgium and also all the Israel haters. Happy holiday, everyone. This is the eve of Purim's in 2 days, I think. Let's see. As many Europeans should die, a continent responsible for the murder of millions of Jews. I don't feel sorry for them, evil and ruthless goyim. And then Israel wonders why their public image is kind of in need of a stern buffing, as it were. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Just looking at all the social media, as you were mentioning, Operation Gladio keeps coming up.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've got an article in FortRuss.com that was talking about exactly the same thing. So why don't you enlighten our listeners about what Gladio was all about?
Well, basically, it was a U.S. operation in Europe. The Baader-Meinhof, the Red Brigades, and all these other so-called terrorist organizations were actually all part of Gladio. But, this is nonsense. The other thing I wanted to mention, Michael, was the nuclear power plants.
Yes.
All nuclear power plants leak. Every single one. Under the sort of temperatures and pressures within the primary containment, the actual crystalline structure of the steel vessel leaks the tiny isotope of hydrogen called tritium. And it actually migrates through the crystalline structure.
Yeah, you can't actually have any kind of a tank that will store hydrogen gas. It will bleed right through the metal. In fact,
exactly.
If you remember I'll give you a good visible example, the Apollo moon rocket, the Saturn V. And you would see on the two lower stages where just as it launches, there's all this ice that's falling off the outside. And that's because the liquid hydrogen, which is very cold, was seeping through the walls of the tank, and moisture in the air was literally attaching and freezing to the side of the rocket. And that's where all that ice that falls off just at the moment of launch comes from.
Yeah, but the really important thing is about these nuclear power plants, the secondary containment has to be evacuated on a regular basis, usually to atmosphere, of all this radioactive hydrogen. Otherwise, it builds up to an explosive mixture. So all nuclear power plants leak radiation into the atmosphere.
Yes, they do, but it's supposed to be kept under control. In the case of New York and the power station down in Florida, these are amounts well above what would be considered acceptable or normal.
Absolutely. I believe it, but I think it's in the case of the Florida machine, it's leaking out through the water system or the cooling system.
It's leaking out through the cooling system. But you see, the U.S. government isn't going to be interested in fixing these problems and fixing the fact that these power stations are always leaking a little bit of radiation. They're looking for somebody to blame. And that's why this sudden story about how the Brussels attackers were going to attack the power station. And let's be very honest, nuclear power stations have much better security than airports and train stations because the public isn't allowed to go in and out there on a regular basis. That's what makes security at public transport difficult. Your business depends on customers coming in and customers going out. Nuclear power stations don't have that.
Absolutely. But getting back to this Belgium problem, it looks like the social media certainly is just not believing anything that's coming out of Belgium. I mean, the ridiculous nonsense with this laptop that was thrown in a bin.
Yes.
I mean, who disposes of a laptop without doing a format just to get rid of what's on it? even if you were just throwing it away.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. And if you're getting ready to sacrifice yourself to Allah, you're not going to tidy up the place before you walk on out. And nobody writes a suicide note that they don't want somebody to read somewhere. The story doesn't make sense, But again, they've got ad executives making this stuff up. The same people who came up with Puppy Monkey Baby.
Yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, the size of those explosions, it had to be more than a vest. I think it was probably a large piece of luggage that was stuffed full of it.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Or could have even been something planted elsewhere. I mean, I'm forgetting which one it was, but there was one of these false flag bombings where it was obvious the explosion had actually come down from the roof. And, of course, the London 7/7 bombing, looking at the wreckage of the car, it was obvious the bomb had actually been under the floor and not being carried by the patsy in a backpack.
Yeah, all the aluminium floor was twisted upwards.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, listen, John, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here, getting on back to the news. And again, nobody's buying the official story. Over at John Rappaport, his website, ISIS attacked Brussels, the U.S. created ISIS, therefore, and this is an opinion we're seeing around the world, the blood of Brussels, and for that matter Paris, is on the hands of the U.S. government, and in particular on the hands of Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton, who was in charge of all these escalations into all these countries that are very unhappy with us. And as it turns out, this is another indicator, there was a major anti-terror drill in Europe just a couple weeks ago, including Brussels, where they're practicing the response, multi-site terror attacks here. Okay, now here is our daily dose of Booga Booga. They're trying to rebrand ISIS as this evil villain and make us all forget that ISIS works for the U.S. government. And ISIS, or somebody claiming to be ISIS, has announced they're going to crucify a Christian priest tomorrow on Good Friday. So somebody really wants a war between Christians and Muslims, and I wonder who could that be. Now, if they really do crucify this guy, and if he's in good health, it's going to take him days, maybe a week, to die. And that's going to get Christians scratching their heads as to why Joshua, supposedly died after just a few hours. And if you read the Bible closely, even Pontius Pilate was scratching his head over that one. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I got an email from a listener to remind me that Purim actually happened yesterday. It's tied to the full moon, and it ended last night. And they are correct. When I was married to my first wife, I paid a lot more careful attention to those sorts of things. Now that I'm married to the lovely Lady Claire, the focus is now on Easter, which is like the big show for her church choir. Okay, let's see. Got another email. Apparently, a high school student, they were discussing what happened in Brussels, and the student said, it sounds like it's a false flag attack. And the teacher's response was, how dare you say that to all the people who died in the attack? Harumph, harumph, harumph. No, we're not saying anything to all the people who died in the attack because they're dead and not listening. We're saying it to the people who did the attack. And false flags are an historical fact of life. Gleiwitz, Reichstag fire, Lusitania, Pearl Harbor. And that's a reality. And this basically tells us that, at least in this high school, the teachers are there to brainwash the children, to control their little minds, to make them useful to the New World Order. Speaking of bovine excrement, there's this article that's coming out of the Daily Telegraph screaming about how Australia's big threat is not from the immigrants. Australia's threat is from the multi-generational Muslims who've been there all along. And they could be radicalized. Somebody's really trying to kick off a Christians versus Muslim global war. And I wonder who would do a dastardly thing like that. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Peter in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, hi. I just picked up the paper today, living in Los Angeles, to see, and we've talked about this, I've called about it before, that today, or yesterday anyways, the University of California Regents have now equated anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel. And so now on the UC system, to include, all the universities, UCLA, Berkeley, there's a bunch more. Any professor who teaches about the Nakba, any professor who teaches about the Jews-only roads, Jews-only towns, Jews-only laws, about white phosphorus and open-air concentration camps, about the USS Liberty, about everything. Well, now the professor will, like in the past many others, will lose tenure and be fired. Any student who does that will be like the people who were arrested in Irvine for protesting the Israeli ambassador. They'll be expelled from school and if not charged with a crime. And I want to go on that there's also been an anti-BDS thing. This is all to kill the BDS.
Yes.
Passed in Ohio. Illinois,
before we get to Ohio and Illinois and all these other places where their state governments are under Tel Aviv's control as much as Washington, D.C., I have a message to the University of California system. I hereby demand that you ban all criticism of the Nazis because it is just flagrant anti-Germanism on display. That's my response to that. And it really is silly. And it does tell us the degree to which the United States of America has been subverted by a foreign government. Washington, D.C. is a Vichy government, a puppet regime. Now, look at all these other nations who are trying to kick out their puppet governments. They don't like being under foreign rule. Why should we be any different? Why should we accept it? I mean, clearly on display here, Israel does not value what we value. They don't value freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry. What they want is total dictatorship. They want to control what our children know and believe. They're scared of free speech.
Michael, these are the states that I know of so far. Ohio, Illinois, New York, South Carolina, Florida, Arizona. That's what I know of. But also, Obama has signed anti-BDS executive orders, and embedded in the Trans-Pacific Partner are also stipulations that are anti-BDS.
Yes, and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. You know something? They can do that all they want. They can't stop grassroots action. Okay, what are they going to do? Have somebody stand there with an M16 pointed at our head saying, you will buy this product from the Israeli settlements? We don't have to. We still have that much choice at the market. Up in Canada, where they're trying to crack down on the Israeli settlement protests and BDS up there, there's been all of a sudden this appearance of a grass movement where ordinary people who know what's going on are just printing up their own stickers, and they're going into the supermarkets and just sticking them on the packages when nobody's looking. It's a guerrilla movement, and the reality is Israel is behaving badly. And we have a right to protest about it under the First Amendment. And if you are not going to support the First Amendment, you are not a legitimate government of this land. Period. End of discussion. It's a zero-tolerance policy. We have freedom of speech, not permitted speech. And if I still lived in California, and if I had been fortunate enough to have children, the very last place I would send them for an advanced education would be the University of California system. Not when they're going to basically reshape their education to serve a foreign master. I don't think so.
Well, also, I know that you covered it on your website. I don't know about it on the show, but the McGraw-Hill pulling thousands of copies of its textbook that had accurate maps of the progressive ethnic cleansing and confiscation of land.
Yeah, we did cover it on the radio show as well. I mean, we've all seen the map. It's in my article, The Maps Tell the Story, and it is an accurate presentation of how Israel has been nibbling away at Palestine over the years, and Israel said these maps are hateful. They breed hate of Israel, and McGraw-Hill buckled under. So we now have a foreign government telling us what can and cannot be in our textbooks. Are we not supposed to be a free nation? Is the government in Washington, D.C. not supposed to serve we, the American people? At what point do you stand up and say, enough, we refuse to live under puppet rule for a foreign government, especially one as demonstrably apartheid and abusive as Israel?
Well, I had a conversation with my sister several weeks ago, Michael, who always objects to me using words like saying they're loaded words. She's done this for years. When I would describe and use words like Lebensraum, like concentration camp, like ethnic cleansing, like book burning, like Nazis, and like racial supremacy. And now we're not allowed to say that.
Well, yeah, because
loaded words.
The PC crowd can't stand loaded words because they convey meaning. And political correctness says that you have to use words that don't really carry much meaning at all, and that's what keeps you, mentally paralyzed. Words are supposed to carry meaning. They're supposed to carry power. And we had better start looking at the parallels between what we're seeing here in the United States of America and what we've seen in tyrannies of the past, whether it's Nazi Germany, Stalin's Soviet Union, Pol Pot in Cambodia. We've got all the symptoms of just descending rapidly into outright dictatorship, and it's a dictatorship subservient to a foreign government.
Well, I sent back this email this morning with the article about the University of California. I went into the different states and the TPP and so on, and I said, tell me what of these words don't apply, and by the way, now I'm not allowed to say them in this state. Now that it's against the law to say what I've said. And tell me who are the Nazis here and who aren't.
Absolutely.
Anyway, it drives me nuts. And at some point, I also told her, since I'm not going to shut up about this, I could end up in prison for this. But I'm not going to stop. I mean, this is my country. I've got a daughter. I'm not going to allow this to happen, and I will not allow them to restrict the terms of the debate.
No, we have the First Amendment, and we had better be ready to fight for it. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Peter. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Obama is out there, at least according to this report in IntelliHub. Obama says that ISIS is not an existential threat to the U.S. Well, of course not. They're working for us. They destroy the United States. Who signs the paychecks? Anyway. All right, let's go ahead and grab ourselves a couple of phone calls. James in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I wanted to talk about that PTSD shot article, and I'll tell you both why it will never be a common treatment and how it speaks to the central problem that human beings have, why we have people who are lacking in compassion and empathy, and then why we have people that are too passive. This is my life's work. It's developmental neuropsych. First of all, why it will never be common is because if you were a drug dealer or you worked for drug dealers, would you sell people an everlasting gobstopper of drugs?
No, of course not. Of course not. I mean, we're going to be talking a little bit later. There's been another strange death of a cancer researcher. And no, you're absolutely right. The pharmaceutical companies want people to be suffering from PTSD so they can sell them pills month after month after month after month after month. Nobody in the medical industrial complex wants a cure for anything. Look how long they've been talking about a cure for the common cold. No, they don't want a cure for the common cold. They want more treatments. That makes more money. That's where the big bucks are in. Nobody's looking for a cure for anything. They'll say they are during fundraising. We're searching for a cure for whatever. But name any disease. How many of these charities raising money to find a cure for whatever have ever actually found one? The money goes into research for more treatments. And PTSD is going to be exactly the same.
I know of a neuroendocrinologist at the Cincinnati VA, and he's working on tramadol, which is more like a antidepressant. It acts on 6 different receptors. But here's the main problem, the reason we have overlords that are uncompassionate and lack empathy. You've seen a picture of a brain and that little bun-like structure at the base. That's called the cerebellum. That you'll look in neurology text and it'll tell you it's about motor control. But it's also your center of affection and socialization, and it suppresses or turns off fear and anger. You have 2 little structures on either side of the brain called the amygdala. That's your centers of fear and aggression, your fight or flight, your source of religious visions, and the site of action of LSD. But the amygdala also determine what goes into long-term memory.
Okay.
But the cerebellum, unfortunately, it's the structure that's most liable to damage during development or after.
Yes.
By all kinds of things, but primarily by a lack of vestibular stimulation by rocking, from the mother rocking the baby, but it can also be damaged by drugs, alcohol, trauma, and the PTSD is purely overactivity in the amygdala and the glutamate receptors that are there. Glutamate's like the gas pedal for your brain, and GABA is the brake pedal, and GABA is you have your most advanced set of GABA receptors in the cerebellum.
Okay.
And you have atrophy of that and autism. It's like standing a pencil up on the line and letting it fall. If you damage the cerebellum, it can fall on one side and you could become too passive. On the other side, you become too aggressive. But I'll send you a couple articles which describe the mechanisms and
well, I'll read the articles. I find the subject very fascinating. But I think the real issue is, what is our government doing to our military that they come home this damaged? And why is it not more profitable in the long run to not put these kids through this kind of trauma? But again,
right.
As you say, they don't care about us. They really don't. Anyway, listen.
Each other. Okay.
Okay, James, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we've got more calls and we're coming up on the top of the hour news here. But please do send me those articles, and I will read them. So we're going to let you go and switch over here to Martin in California. Aloha, Martin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I've been listening to you for years and years now. First time I ever called you. I love your show. Love your dedication. Anyhow, what I wanted to talk about was the airport suicide bombing in Brussels. The official news story showed 3 guys coming in with large suitcases, rolling them in.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly 2 of them committed suicide and 1 of them escaped. So the suicide bombers weren't vest bombers; they were suitcase bombers. But
why? I understand that, but they claimed that suicide vests had been used. You know, because again, I'm in agreement with you that more than likely the luggage contained the explosive, if the explosive hadn't been planted in a location ahead of time. Because I think these 2 guys were patsies. The police knew who they were. They were under surveillance, and yet somehow they managed to slip away. So I don't think these 2 guys actually did it. I think they were just set up to be in the right location at the right time to take the blame. That's why they gave Lee Harvey Oswald that job at the school book depository, so that he would be in the right location to be framed for the murder of President John F. Kennedy. Because you always got to have a patsy when you do these. You got to have somebody who's going to take the blame.
I agree.
Yeah.
That could quite well be. But another piece of propaganda that I heard regarding this is that the ingredients for the bombs were supposedly picked up at a drugstore, being acetone or hydrogen peroxide, and a hardware store being nitric acid and nails. And I can't see, what little I know about explosives, I can't see that those ingredients would have created that much damage, even if it was the size of a large suitcase.
It did look like a hybris of explosive to me, and I don't think that you can just buy nitric acid over the counter in Europe. You certainly can't here in the United States. You got to have all kinds of paperwork and licenses, and that is really the source of energy in any nitrate-based explosive. Acetone and hydrogen peroxide itself, you can make a good woomph with it, but it's very low brisive. And I think it's just more of these stories they're coming up with to try and, sell us the idea that the terrorists can just decide to be terrorists in our midst, and that's why they have to go on spying on every single citizen, because who knows, Michael Rivero could be sitting there doing his radio show, and a stray cosmic ray streaks through his brain and flips a neuron, and all of a sudden tomorrow he's going to go on out and commit mayhem with things that he can buy down at the local shopping mall. And it's an absolutely ludicrous joke.
Highly unlikely.
Yeah, highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely. More likely it was done by some military-grade explosives.
I would agree.
That kind of a big bang like that does not count. Also, I don't see why they would have to kill themselves if they were that far advanced that they could create such a large bomb. They could have done a remote detonator and just walked away.
That's another gaping big hole in the story. I mean, obviously, if they're wearing vests, then they die with the explosion. If the bomb is in the luggage, why didn't they just walk away? What is the point? of sacrificing yourself, you can come back and bomb again. Those who bomb and run away live to bomb another day.
Yeah. Well, that was my point. I'll call again. I was going to talk to you about the way they're framing this Clinton-Trump debate, but I know we're probably running out of time here. But just quickly that, it seems like we're on to stage 2 in this, where they accept that Trump is going to be the Republican nominee, and Clinton, of course, is going to be the Democratic one, and they're trying to frame it as her being the stable, experienced one, and him being the brash, inexperienced one, and just try to throw everything out.
Well, looking at how the experienced, let me finish this because we're out of time. Given how the experienced career politicians have screwed this nation up, I'm ready for brash and inexperienced. Let's give them a shot. Let's get outside the box here on that whole situation, okay?
Yeah. Hey, have you seen that show, Madam Secretary? Can you believe that they're trying to actually, make that out to be the way Hillary is?
Yeah, it's just outright propaganda, and for that reason, I never tuned into it. It was just too obvious over the top. Not interested at all. All right, well, listen, Martin, I'm going to have to let you go here. We're coming up on our top of the hour news break and commercials. I know we got 2 callers waiting on the line. I'm going to be ask you to be very patient. We're going to be away for a little while we get the news and commercials here. And then we'll be back with the phone calls, and then we're going to be talking about the candidates and Trump and how the We Hate Donald Trump network is out there saying, absolutely, there's no way that Donald Trump could prevail over Empress Hillary the First. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And before we go to the phone lines, I'm going to ask our callers to be a little bit more patient. I do want to respond to that story that we heard on the news break about how somebody tried to hack into the dam and mess around with the spill gates and all the rest of that. The reality is that critical computer systems are supposed to be air-gapped. And did you hear where they said more attacks are still possible? No, you can stop them. Just unplug that Ethernet to the outside world. I mean, that's what they do with nuclear power plants and power stations. Why are dams being handled differently? And if there's a threat, pull the wire. The computers that run the physical dam don't need email. They don't need web browsing. They don't need iTunes. This story just does not make any sense whatsoever until you remember that more than 28,000 dams, about 1/3 of all the dams in the United States, are already more than 50 years old, which is the standard lifespan of most dams. Just like our bridges. They're decaying, they're rotting, there could be some dam collapses. We've been hearing about murmurings of dams that are getting ready to let go here in the United States of America. Does the government want to accept responsibility for the destruction of a collapsed dam after decades of neglect? Because they needed to send our money to Israel and prop up Wall Street and commit war crimes against other countries that haven't done anything to us. Oh, no. We'll just blame the terrorists. Oh, my goodness, the dam broke. 40,000 homes got washed away. It had to be a hacker. One of those ISIS terrorist hackers did it. We're not to blame. How could you think we, the government, are to blame for anything bad? So forth and so on. All right, let's go out and get some phone calls taken care of here. Randy in Illinois, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was calling in just about what you were talking about, those hackers.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the press conference of the Attorney General and her assistant on C-SPAN, and they also said those boys were attacking U.S. banks. I just want to know, do you think our government is setting us up for a fake 9/11 on Wall Street?
Oh, absolutely. I wrote an article about it, I think almost a year ago, the virtual 9/11. At the point where they can't keep this little Ponzi scheme central bank going any longer, the U.S. government could take down the entire banking system, and then they could say, oh, we were just on the verge of, getting this economic recovery going, and we were doing our best, and those dastardly Iranian, Chinese, Russian, ISIS hackers just ruined it for everybody. And yeah, it's definitely something we've talked about in the past.
Well, hopefully they're not telegraphing their punch. Hey, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to go ahead and grab Jim in New York. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Grab Jim.
Hello, Jim?
Hello.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Mike?
I'm fine. What's on your mind?
I'm wondering if you heard about the new documentary coming out about Leo Wanta.
No, I hadn't. I haven't been paying close attention to Leo, but give us a brief summary.
This is a documentary, and you can see a 10-minute clip of it online, and it's called Eagle One to Wanta. Leo Wanta was a secret agent under the Tatrin Doctrine. He was chosen by President Reagan to basically bankrupt the Soviet Union and, without firing a shot, have them change over to a federation, which did happen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of interesting facts in this documentary, and everything that's going on these days with our country as far as, false flags and the corporate-controlled media. It's all because we're a corporation. We're not a country anymore. We're the U.S. Corp.
Well, the federal government is a corporation. The rest of us, we're still the United States of America. I guess we didn't get the memo on any of that stuff.
We're not persons anymore either. We're corporations too. No such thing as person.
Well, no, if you are a corporation, you're a person. That was decided in Citizens United. I think the upshot of all of this is how self-contradictory our legal system has become, where politicians are always going to pass laws. I mean, it's called the law of the hammer. If you give a small child a hammer, everything they're going to encounter needs pounding. If you give a politician the right to make laws, they're going to justify their wealth, power, and position by making laws, some of which are downright silly. And yes, the Soviet Union came down, and the U.S. likes to take credit for it, partly through this story of Leo Wanta. The other claim, of course, is that the Strategic Missile Defense Initiative, Star Wars, forced the Soviet Union into bankruptcy. But to be very honest, what brought the Soviet Union down was the Soviet people and a system they set up on fax machines called the samizdat, which served for the Soviet Union roughly the same function that the independent media serves here in the United States of America right now. The Soviet Union came down for a wide variety of reasons, many of which are currently being copied here in the United States, or duplicated here in the United States of America. Okay?
Okay, but Leo Wanta, he's known as a $31 trillion man. He was imprisoned, tortured. The Federal Reserve stole the money. He did get it back. There was a court ruling that says he has to get the money back. And with that money, he was supposed to build a super train railway station through all of America. This is what President Reagan wanted to do with that money. Evidently, he's trying to get it back so he can do this. And he's, hit a lot of roadblocks. But this film is supposed to come out right before the election. And there's a lot of interesting facts. Anyone wants to look it up. It's called Eagle One to Wanta. And there's some fascinating stuff that's declassified here relating to Hillary Clinton, relating to Foster, Vince Foster, related to Kennedy assassination. A lot of interesting stuff.
All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll look for that. I need to let you go. We got a lot of callers waiting online. We're going to switch over here to John in Texas. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I would like to know what would you think about that thing in Arizona in that county where I think the last time they had an election there was over 200 polling stations, and then now there was like less than 60 or just about 60. I would like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, basically it's just a way of tailoring the vote to reach a desired result. You go on in there and you shut down polling places in those precincts that are going to vote against you, and you make sure there are plenty of polling places, plenty of ballots, plenty of voting machines in the precincts that are going to vote for you. And this is epidemic all across the country. And our election system is viewed as a joke by the rest of the world right now. And apparently the mayor of Phoenix is calling for an investigation into just how this came about. And apparently the Arizona director of elections is saying, well, it was all really the fault of the voters. I mean, they didn't get there early enough, and it's all their fault, and we're doing our job properly. We just didn't think they were going to get out and vote. And it's all a bunch of...
I heard that some people were staying there for like over 5 hours.
Yes.
And they had to order like lunch and even dinner and like some till midnight. The stuff was a mile long.
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't get to vote, and that's the whole purpose of this. The whole purpose of
that's another thing. That voting thing. We may not have all the money in the world or anything, and we may not have any money at all, but we have the one thing that we do have is the right to vote. And
yeah, but our elections are crooked. It's time to accept our election system is rigged. The only thing that they can't cheat is an overwhelming landslide, because then it's obvious the election has been stolen and everybody starts warming up the tar and plucking the chickens here. And so that's why those people who are supporting Donald Trump, you got to get a huge margin for him, because if it's within 2 or 3%, those rigged election machines will steal it back from him. John, I got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. We got a bunch more callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to the show here. And somebody just sent me this article about right in Washington D.C. There's a very famous historical bridge, the Memorial Bridge. And the National Park Service is saying that it is in need of $250 million in repairs, and if they don't get it, it's going to become a footbridge. It'll be closed to vehicular traffic. Our nation is rotting out from underneath us while the U.S. government takes your tax money and gives it to Wall Street, gives it to the war machine, and gives it to Israel. Does this sound like wise and prudent management of this nation? I'll bet you if Donald Trump becomes president, the first thing he's going to do is look around the country and say, we need some repairs here. And you know something? Repairs are going to generate jobs. Wouldn't that be a radical idea? As opposed to our current government saying, no, you can't have jobs, just take your welfare payments from us, stay dependent on us, and we're going to take all the money and give it away. All right, boy, we got a lot of phone calls waiting here. Let's get into them. Mike in New Hampshire, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mike, are you there?
Mike, go.
I'm a long-time listener, Michael, and I've noticed recently that we're talking about free speech. I don't think free speech is as free as the people would like to think it is on this network.
And why is that?
Well, you're one of the hosts that almost routinely doesn't want to talk about geoengineering. That you don't want to talk about.
Yeah, because the reason I don't talk about geoengineering is because this is part of the kookification propaganda. In fact, we got an article here on the front page of What Really Happened announcing that the CIA is launching a new campaign to go on out to the Internet and try and make it look silly with things like the fake Apollo moon landings and geoengineering and chemtrails and HARP and Loch Ness Monster and the rest of it. Okay, now I'm a supporter of freedom of speech, but that's not an excuse to just go on out and junk up the discussion with a lot of nonsense. All right, let's grab another phone call here. Joe in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One of them was you posted recently the invisible ballots thing by the G. Edward Griffin.
Yes.
And I think that that's a very compelling video. Maybe a lot of people haven't seen it. And the other video that I wanted to talk about is called, on YouTube, it's called Wayne Paul, USA has been bankrupt since 1933 by a Gem Hunter 99.
Yes.
And I think that might have something to do with how corporations and people and issuing of the Social Security number and so on and so forth. But that's not really how I wanted to not really elaborate on it. I'll say the other thing is...
Well, the general model going back to 1913 was to take a free republic with independent citizens and turn them into serfs, and do it in a way where the serfs didn't realize they were serfs. And that's how they got through with, first of all, their third private central bank, and they did it in the same year that they claimed the 16th Amendment authorizing a direct income tax was ratified, so that we are personally working for and sending our money to this privately owned central bank. And that's basically it. This is the same scam private central banks have played on all of humanity for going on 300 years. And everything that has happened to our political system since 1913 is all about turning us into chattel owned by the private central bankers.
Yeah, that's what the Wayne Paul video on YouTube addresses.
Yes.
And it's done by, someone posted it named Gem Hunter 99. The other thing I'd like to say is sometimes you have a caller who seems very knowledgeable, and I think it's Wes in Idaho or something.
Yes.
I was wondering what his knowledge might be of the White Horse Prophecy or the Great State of Deseret.
Well, we're going to have to ask him the next time he calls on in, or he'll volunteer that information, okay?
Okay. Thank you. Great
All right.
show.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Scott in Virginia. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? And I apologize for being rapid on the calls, but we got a lot of news and a lot of phone calls, and I'm just trying to cover as many bases as I can. Scott, what's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just wanted to reminisce with you about the good old days when we used to have presidents that would go to countries like China and Russia or the Soviet Union and bring up the fact that those countries had illegally detained people. And I find it ironic and maybe a first that a U.S. president goes to a country like Cuba asking them to release people that are unjustifiably imprisoned.
Yeah, on the same island where the U.S. government has a torture facility. I love it.
Has there ever been a case like that in history, I wonder?
I wouldn't know. We could not possibly rule it out because we don't know what other secret torture facilities the U.S. government has had all along. I'll speculate now. We still don't know how bad that torture scandal really went. We've identified maybe 4 or 5 of these facilities. There's probably many, many more.
Isn't it unbelievable that if they can pull that off, well, they have pulled it off. I mean, he's gone there and said, we need to release political prisoners. And the cognitive dissonance.
And he says it with a straight face. Meanwhile, we've got Leonard Peltier and Mumia al-Jabbar are still rotting away in prison for crimes which apparently they did not actually commit.
Unbelievable. Well, I know you got a lot of calls, so I won't keep you, Mike. Have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch to Mo in Florida. Mo, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I'll be brief, and I just want to hang up and get your comments. I think sometimes we forget, we think these bankers and these world powers, whether you call them the Rothschilds, whatever, Illuminati, banksters, the elite that run the show, we think they're so all-powerful. But I'm just reading from the U.S. News headline in 2008, and I was very brief. It says, "Oh, how the mighty have fallen." Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson reportedly kneeled before House Speaker Nancy Pelosi last night in a bid to keep her party on board with the bailout package, while the GOP chafes and grimaces so it can get through Congress onto the president's desk before the credit market seize up. And it talks about how he was considered, Goldman Sachs, they converted him to God. And my point is this, that look at how fragile this system is. Look at how weak they really are.
Yes.
And how like you always say, I mean, it's like the movie Ants, there's so many more of us than them, but we think we're like those of us.
Well, it's brainwashing. Banking and governments operate like religions. You are held a prisoner by your belief in what you've been told is the holy dogma. And when we all become heretics, that's the first step toward our freedom. And you're right, the system is very fragile. I mean, they're just propping it up with instantly created money by the bucketful that's hastening the end of the U.S. dollar. If everybody in America paid off their credit card bill tomorrow, the system would collapse. If everybody emptied their savings accounts tomorrow, the system would collapse. It is that fragile, and all they can think of doing in order to perpetuate this flawed system is just figure out ways to take more wealth from we the people, but we don't have it for them to take. That's where this whole plan breaks down and fails. They're living in a dream world that we still have money out here in the heartland, and we don't. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take another phone call, and then we're going to get back to some of the headlines here. Ken in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just want you to give Obama a break. There's only so much he can do as president. He doesn't have a whole lot of power. And at the beginning of this administration, he talked about building roads, building bridges, repairing bridges and repairing roads and building a decent rail system in this country.
Well, he talked about it, but he didn't do a thing about it.
But he can't do it. He can't do that. Congress has to do that.
No. What Obama can do is veto all the bills coming out of Congress that send money to Israel and send money to prop up Wall Street and spend untold amounts of trillions on these wars of conquest. He does have that power. Okay?
He can do that.
All right.
But he's a corporatist, and you have to, and there isn't so much the corporations can let him do.
I disagree. I mean, first of all, we know that Obama is exceeding his constitutional limits on authority with his executive orders. And because Congress has let him get away with it for so long, Obama can write these executive orders and say, you know, we need to spend money on building our bridges, and Congress may come back and say you can't do that, and Obama's going to say, well, wait a minute, you let me get away with it before for Obamacare. But the reality is that Obama, you know, back in 2008 when he was campaigning, he promised he was going to end the wars. He didn't make the effort. He escalated them. He's not building roads and bridges. He's bombing the heck out of them in places like Syria and Libya and Yemen. So I'm sorry. I judge Obama based on his job performance, not on the promises that he made. Okay? And that's just the way it's going to be. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Back to the headlines. Now, story coming out of Investment Watch blog, Trump is beefing up his security as violent leftists continue assaults. And, of course, we're talking about Black Lives Matter, Occupy Movement, Move On, all funded in part by George Soros. Remember that story we reported on earlier in the week, where some of the people who were at these rallies screaming about Trump must go and everything were openly admitting they answered an ad in Craigslist. They were being paid $16 an hour to go on out and disrupt Trump's rallies. And, of course, there was that one guy who jumped the barricade, and I don't blame Donald Trump for beefing up his security. In the place where he is standing right now, there's no such thing as too much security, because there's a lot of people who want him out of this race. And if the Ron Paul treatment isn't going to work, they will try the Robert Kennedy approach. Now, interestingly enough, somebody did this wonderful video. It was posted over at Desert Peace. And it's taking place outside AIPAC. And this guy is talking to these anti-Trump protesters who are screaming what a racist that Donald Trump is and everything. And so the guy making the video gives them some quotes. And they just sort of assume it's from Donald Trump. And they say, oh, yeah, that's racist. That's absolutely vile. That's absolutely racist. He says, no. Actually, that was Netanyahu who said that. And they all go back and, oh, well, that's different for Israel. Israel's allowed to be racist. They're allowed to be apartheid. You know, they have this existential reason. And they just do this complete 180 about face and support racist rhetoric from Netanyahu that they had just condemned, thinking it was Donald Trump. Thank you, Common Core. So, anyway. Now, there was a very interesting analysis over in Newsmax, and I think there's some merit to what they're thinking. How Trump can clear the GOP field and realign American politics. And they're basically saying that Donald Trump should offer Governor Kasich the vice presidential slot and Senator Cruz the currently vacant Supreme Court seat. And it makes sense. Ted Cruz can't be the vice president for the same reason he can't be the president. The 12th Amendment imposes on vice presidents the same natural-born citizen requirement as the presidency. It's a good suggestion. It would bring all of the Kasich and Cruz supporters into the Trump camp. I still think a nice female vice president would be a good tool against Hillary. But it's a good idea. Somebody's put some careful thought into this. Now, the other day we were talking about how at Emory University somebody had chalked a pro-Trump message on the sidewalk, and all the students were traumatized. Oh, it's the T word. I can't see the T word. I'm going to cry and miss my home economics class. So Emory University is now saying they're going to use security cameras to track down and punish students who dare chalk their support for Donald Trump. And notice it's specific for Trump. They're not talking about going after students who are supporting Hillary Clinton and chalking her name on the pavement. And it's not like they're using spray cans. The next rain that comes, the chalk is gone. That's the way chalk works. Now, Ted Cruz is out there trying to prove that he is a man. He's going after Ted Cruz, or he's going after Donald Trump, calling him a sniveling coward for comments Trump made about his wife. Harumph, harumph, harumph. And apparently Trump tweeted an unflattering photo of Heidi Cruz. And I don't agree with what Trump did. I'm not in the mafia, but I also believe in that rule. The families are off limits. You do business with the person that you're doing business with. You run against the candidate you're running against. The family's off limits. So, but I'd like to point out three things here as Ted Cruz thumps his chest. And personally, I would love to see Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, go out behind the woodshed and settle this issue man to man. That would be fun to watch. But on a more serious note, Trump did not start the wife issue. It was started with this ad from Cruz supporters, denied by the Cruz campaign, showing a nude photo of Donald Trump's wife, who is a professional model, and in my opinion will be the hottest first lady we've had in U.S. history. Second, we don't choose presidents based on whether they will defend their wives' honor or not, but whether they will take care of this nation. And third, and most important, do we want someone that easy to provoke to rage holding the keys to the nuclear missiles? I don't think so. And a reminder, we need to keep this issue about Ted Cruz's nationality in the public mind. The Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, even though Washington, D.C. thinks it's a blankety-blank piece of paper, says the president must be a natural-born United States citizen. Ted Cruz's birth certificate is Canadian. And when Ted Cruz was born, Canada did not allow dual citizens. He was born a Canadian citizen. He admits he renounced his Canadian citizenship. His mother filled out the paperwork to make him a U.S. citizen, something like 12 years after they'd moved here. He's a naturalized U.S. citizen, but naturalized and natural born are not the same thing. And we need to keep this moving forward because the GOP may ignore this issue, and the establishment media may ignore this issue, Ted Cruz's supporters may ignore the issue. But I guarantee you, if Ted Cruz is the GOP nominee, Hillary Clinton's lawyers will mount a lawsuit. And we will go into November with just one name on that ballot. And that is not what the United States of America is supposed to be. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton is out there waving the bloody shirts of Brussels and saying she has a plan to defeat ISIS. And her plan is, we will defeat ISIS. Kind of lacking in a little bit of detail. But there's an article over in moonofalabama.org pointing out that everything Clinton is talking about comes back down to further erosion of our freedoms, further erosion of our privacy. And every time there's one of these so-called terror attacks around the world, the U.S. government treats we, the law-abiding American citizens, as if we're the terrorists. And they're even out there saying, you're all potential terrorists. No, we're not. We're patriots. We're Americans. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Glenn Greenwald is out with a very important article. Hillary Clinton has embraced some of the most brutal dictators in the world, and Glenn has gone back looking at Hillary's actions as Secretary of State. Not the press releases, not the propaganda, not what Hillary says she's trying to do or promises she will do. Greenwald is looking at what she actually did. And a lot of this ties in with Larry Klayman's attempted lawsuit, RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation, where some of these very brutal regimes were donating money to her charitable foundation and getting favorable treatment from the State Department, including weapons deals. And I think that's a good guideline for all of us as we finish this election year. Don't listen to what they're saying. Go back and find out what they did. What have they accomplished or not accomplished, as the case may be. Hillary Clinton's track record says all that you need to know about her. Even Rudy Giuliani was out there saying that Hillary Clinton could be considered a founding member of ISIS. Over the last few days, we've published all these flashback articles about how the U.S. encouraged the rise of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The U.S. was giving them weapons in Syria. And so they have these fake bombings to remind us all that ISIS are bad. The U.S. government is good. And that's all you need to know. Don't trouble your silly little minds with any of the complexities. It's really beyond your capability to figure out. Actually, no, it isn't. That's why you're all here. In fact, there's even a video, a YouTube video, of Hillary Clinton saying, yeah, we created Al-Qaeda. Yes, you did. And the blood of Brussels and Syrians and Libyans and Yemenites is on your hands. Camille Paglia is out there talking about Donald Trump, why he's winning, and why she won't vote for Hillary. And she's out there basically saying that Donald Trump is right. We have a right to secure our borders. It's not racism. It's racist if you close the border and say nobody of this religion or nationality can come in. And by the way, U.S. law does allow presidents to do that. What Donald Trump is saying is if you want to come into this country, come on in, but follow the legal vetting process so that we, the United States of America, know that who comes into our country will be a benefit to our society, a contributing member of our economy, and isn't here to just sell drugs or smuggle arms or sponge off our social services. Doesn't that make sense? It's a business-like approach. Donald Trump is a businessman. He wants to run the United States of America on a more business-like footing instead of all of these lies and deceptions and looting and plundering and rigging of the markets and everything. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a quick phone call from Kate in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yeah, what's on my mind is your opinion, and you have to pardon me if you've already given it several times. I haven't tuned in for a while. Anyway, your opinion of Trump's speech at AIPAC.
Well, he got up there and he told AIPAC what AIPAC wanted to hear, and he got a round of applause here. I don't think it was realistic for Trump to get up there and tell Israel to go jump in the Dead Sea. He's running for president, and he understands that AIPAC still has a firm grip on the electoral process in this country. But we're seeing a lot of commentators like Max Blumenthal, they don't believe Trump in his speech before AIPAC. They're saying that basically Trump is playing AIPAC, and if he is, he did it very, very well. The Israeli media, though, is still not at all supportive of Donald Trump. They want Hillary. Everybody is concerned that Donald Trump will not be controllable as president. He doesn't owe anybody anything. He's got his own money, and he might get to be president and decide, you know, I'm thinking maybe it's not such a good idea that we send all this money to Israel when we've got so many problems here to fix at home. Israel wants Hillary Clinton because they know whatever Israel wants, Hillary will deliver it to them. She's been accepting all this huge amount of money from Israeli supporters here in the United States of America, like Haim Saban, rather, and she's already bought and paid for. And she's made that very, very clear. Okay?
I did. I was disappointed when I heard that speech. And another thing is, I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion about Trump as president? I mean, he will be making, a lot less money per year sitting in that Oval Office. I mean, what benefit is it to Trump to be president? And is it simply for the love of country? I mean, I hope so.
Well, I'm sure a big part of it is love of Donald Trump and his ego and his vanity, which we all know he's got in ample supply here. But, if you get away from the money junkies whose entire existence is making more money, you will find many examples of people who make a certain degree of wealth in life, and then they sit back and they said, okay, I don't really need any more money. What can I do that's actually going to be fun or beneficial? And I think a good example of that would be James Cameron, who's a film director I admire greatly. I love his movies. I got all of his Blu-rays. And I admire the fact that he has taken a huge amount of the fortune that he's made and he's plowed it into the sciences, particularly oceanography, which I understand that's a family thing because Michael Cameron, his brother, is an oceanographer. And James Cameron has funded a lot of the development of these latest generation deep diving ROVs. And you can't help but applaud that. And I think Donald Trump has reached the stage where he says he's got enough money. What's the point of making any more? It's kind of lost its charm. And, he's always had political ambitions. And again, because he's reached that attitude of I don't need any more money is why he is seen as uncontrollable by the world's financial interests.
Well, I hope so. And I mean, whether or not I vote for him or vote period, I hope he is a good man and he is forthright with the American people and he will stand for the American people and this nation. And, I was a little concerned when I heard him say, too, that he wants to beef up the police and also the military. We spend more money on the military than any country on this planet. I mean,
again, Trump has reached the stage in his campaign. He's leading in the polls, but he's short of a first ballot victory at the convention, and so he's playing politics, and we need to recognize that's what he's doing. But again, the attraction of Donald Trump is twofold. One, he is not part of the establishment that has destroyed this country over the last couple of decades. Two, he comes from the world of business, where your word is your bond. If you don't keep your promises in the world of business, you are out of business very quickly, and that's a stark contrast to professional politicians who lie about everything from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to bed, and that's just the way that it is. And John in Barbados pointed us to this collection of videos of Donald Trump over the last 30 years. And what he's been saying for the last 30 years is pretty much what he's been saying this year as well. So when Donald Trump speaks, even if you don't agree with it, and I don't agree with a lot of what he says, you know it's how he truly feels. But I think it's time for outsiders. It's like I told that earlier caller, looking at how the establishment career politicians have destroyed this country for the American people. I'm ready for a brash outsider to come on in and mix things up.
Well, yeah. All right, Michael, I appreciate it. Keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
So, Mike, I saw this morning, when I woke up, I turned on RT. It's usually my station I usually turn on now in the morning for the news, before I go to work. And they had the RT crew. They were the Syrian army, and they had some ISIS prisoners.
Yes.
And the ISIS prisoners were admitting that they were bringing oil, in and out through the Turkish border.
Yep. That
the Turks were allowing it to go through the border, and they had documentation showing it, ISIS own documentation.
Yeah, we've got the video linked to WhatReallyHappened.com, where the Syrian army's got all the paperwork and documentation, and we've known for months. Turkey is supplying the U.S.-backed terrorists inside Syria, and they're stealing Syria's oil and putting it on the world market.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, RT is probably, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best news sources in the world today. It's incredible.
I agree. I'd love to talk to some of the people over at Russia Today, and we're already hearing all these rumblings about how we've got to shut down all these other TV networks because we're losing the propaganda war. We have a right to lie to the American people with impunity and be believed. No, you don't. I'm sorry, you don't.
Why don't you try to get on Crosstalk? That's a great show.
I need to contact somebody over there, and I figure they know where I am. When they're ready for me, they'll call me. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call, Mark. We're going to take a break for news and commercials, and we'll be back with hour number 3. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. John is still in our control room, ready to answer the phone. And I'm seeing this article that's come on now. We were talking earlier about this claim that this dam in New York had been hacked into, and they had played with the spill gates and were out to cause damage. And now the story is that it was Iranian hackers. And they've charged 7 people supposedly for Iranian hack attacks on our banks and on the dam. Now, I understand that banks are kind of open out there a little bit. They have to be on the net. Again, critical infrastructure like dams and nuclear power plants or conventional power plants, those computers can be isolated from the Internet. There's no need for them to be on the Internet. And there are ways to firewall them or outright air gap them. This reminds me very much of that story from just a couple of weeks ago where some court ordered Iran to pay the victims, the families of the victims of 9/11, some huge amount of money, even though the court acknowledged there wasn't actually any proof that Iran had anything to do with 9/11. But it's being given a lot of news coverage to demonize Iran. And this is all part of a propaganda run-up ahead of eventual invasion of Iran. And remember, when General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this whole war agenda back in 2003, he said the plan that he was shown ended with the invasion and conquest of Iran sometime in 2008. Obviously, they're off the schedule. But that's what this is all about. And I'll tell you why. The NSA cannot find the ransomware writers. They cannot find the people breaking into the banks. They can't find the real terrorists, and we're supposed to believe that they were able to find that Iran broke into that dam? I don't think so. It's impossible to reconcile those two realities, or the reality with the claim that the U.S. government has proof that Iran did this or Iran did that on the computer networks. Nonsense. When they can find and jail the ransomware writers, yeah, maybe. But not in the current situation. They certainly missed Brussels was going to happen, if you believe the official story. But yes, we absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt it was those gosh darn Iranians. They're going to blow up the dams and crash the banking system. I really do think the theory that I proposed a year ago in the virtual 9/11 is under serious consideration by our government. They need something really big to scare us back into dependence on the government. Because all of these little airport and metro bombings, they've done so many of them, they're losing traction. We're burned out on it. It's lost its shock effect. And one way we know that was, remember after the Paris attack, the Charlie Hebdo attack, everybody was overlaying the transparent flag of France on their Facebook avatars. We're not seeing the flag of Belgium up there. It's lost its effect. Anytime you use a propaganda tool too much, you burn it out. It stops being effective. 20, 30 years ago, you accuse somebody of being an anti-Semite. Oh, my God, no, I'm not. Please, I'll give you whatever money you need. Don't call me an anti-Semite. And today, Abe Foxman comes out and says that somebody's an anti-Semite, and everybody says, okay, fine, sure. Who cares? They've burned it out. So at some point, there's going to be they're going to have to do something so big, bigger than the airport at Brussels, bigger than the cafes at Paris, bigger than 9/11 itself. It's going to have to be huge. Multiple attacks in multiple cities and multiple countries all at the same time, or bring down the computer network, something that is so devastating and disrupting to everybody's ordinary life that we won't even take the chance it's not true. And we'll run screaming for the protection of Big Daddy government. All right, let's go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Paul in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I have a little more information on the Bowman Avenue Dam in Rybrook, New York.
Yes.
In June of 2013, about 2 months before the alleged hack, they had just installed a brand new $2 million sluice gate.
Mm-hmm.
And after the attack, the Feds, Homeland Security, never even notified Westchester County officials that the attack had taken place. So they couldn't have been that concerned. Additionally, it was learned that the controls for the dam were offline. They were manually disconnected so that some more repairs could be done.
Okay.
So there was no real threat from the alleged hack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, they're trying to find something that is going to be effective to scare us back into compliance with the war agenda, and they're thrashing around right now. And if you look at social media following Brussels, nobody's buying the official story anymore. The U.S. government and the establishment media have absolutely blown their own credibility. They did it to themselves. I know the establishment media is out there wringing their hands. Oh, those independent media websites, they've destroyed our business. We can't lie to the people and get paid for it anymore. Well, you know, you did it to yourselves, and I don't have any sympathy for you whatsoever. And
right, and at the very least, Michael, the Feds are terribly inefficient because supposedly one of the keys after 9/11 was to have all the systems, state, local, and federal, coordinated so that they could communicate with each other, and they didn't even bother to tell the Westchester County officials.
Yeah, well, you know, all those fusion sites and everything are all about collecting information on the law-abiding citizens and not actually looking after the country. But at this point, if you look at the Obamacare website, I think that the politics have corrupted the acquisition process of the federal government to the point where they're not able to buy anything that works well and decently because the contracts are going out to somebody's college buddy or somebody's Skull and Bones alumni or something like that. And it's just an open invitation to have charlatans come on up and set up some kind of a company and say, we'll provide what you say that you need for huge amounts of money. Oh, yes, here's the money. And then what is provided turns out to be absolute junk. And that actually does make our nation more vulnerable. We are at greater risk because all of these expensive systems they're building simply don't work, including this NSA mass surveillance system. It hasn't stopped a single terror attack. It hasn't found any of the cyber criminals. It's completely ineffective, along with being a waste of taxpayer money and a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Well, thanks very much, Michael.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go. Getting on back here. Now, Judicial Watch has released a new set of documents that have surfaced in the Benghazi email server scandal. And again, looking past whether something is classified or not, there's a lot of wonderful information in the emails. And Judicial Watch has basically found over 200 conflict of interest that led to $48 million in speaking fees for the Clintons during Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. And it's raising questions about funds Clinton accepted from entities linked to Saudi Arabia, China, and Iran, among others. Iran's the enemy until they have a check for the foundation. Then they're our friend here. We're seeing an allegation now. This is coming out from hangthebankers.com. Facebook is censoring links to the searchable Hillary Clinton emails. And basically shows us that Facebook is part of the problem. Now, getting on to the recent elections and the continuation of massive amounts of fraud. Bernie Sanders came out with an article today. What happened Tuesday in Arizona should be considered a national disgrace. He's absolutely right. And they're talking about how there was hardly any polls. People were waiting in line for 5 hours. A lot of people did not get to vote, which was the ultimate aim. It's election fraud right in front of your face. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the absolute disgrace of the American election system. They're not even trying to hide the fraud any longer. Bernie Sanders came out with an article about Arizona where they just slashed the number of polling places in precincts that weren't going to vote the way they were supposed to. And that's how you shape the election. By limiting polling places, by running out of ballots, not having the necessary forms, just waiting people out until they have to go to work, or they just get disgusted and go home. And yes, it is a form of election fraud. Now, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the Arizona vote recorder is saying it was all the fault of the voters. You know, I mean, she was the one who cut the polling places from 200 to 60. But it's the fault of the voters. They just put the blame on them. And that's becoming a very consistent theme. Up in Utah, there was a historic caucus turnout up in Utah. And there was that electronic online voting system which was experiencing severe technical difficulties that prevented people from voting. But the GOP leaders are saying, the problem with the youth, they were entering incorrect information. They were entering incorrect information. Now remember, the guy who set up Utah's online voting system is a board member for Soros, for one of his foundations. And now it's come out that somebody, we don't know who, set up fake internet voting sites for the Utah GOP online caucus. And they look exactly like the real ones, and nobody knows how many people went to these fake sites. They received emails to say, this is your site for your online voting, and they went and they made a vote for possibly Donald Trump, which was completely ignored. The fraud is there. Now, the Phoenix mayor is calling for a federal government investigation on why there was this major slash in polling places in Maricopa County. Everybody's upset about this. Everybody sees what's going on. Another article over here from Investment Watch blog, massive voter fraud in Utah. Ted cheated. Soros and GOP involved. It's amazing. And, not too surprisingly, this is harming America's image to the rest of the world. We're supposed to be the bastion of democratic process. We're supposed to be the example and the model for the rest of the world. According to Blacklisted News, American elections are ranked the worst among Western democracies. This is a report coming out of the Electoral Integrity Project, which is founded in 2012, does an independent evaluation of the quality of elections worldwide. And the U.S. is exactly at the bottom. And I want to repeat two things I've said before. First, the United States is the nation that put men on the moon. You cannot convince me that it is impossible to come up with a rapid, accurate, fair, honest, verifiable, reliable election system in this country. If we don't have one, it's because those in power don't want one. They want systems that can be rigged, that can be cheated, that can be skewed to serve the interests of the plutocracy. Second, if a government cannot prove beyond all doubt the accuracy, honesty, and fairness of the elections by which they claim authority over us, then we the people are neither legally nor morally obligated to obey that government, to pay its bills, or to sacrifice life and limb of our children in that government's wars of conquest across the globe. There's a very simple fundamental contract in this nation. It's in the Constitution, and we are taught that this is what's supposed to happen when we're in grade school. We, the people, choose our own leaders and then give them the consent to govern us. If we're not choosing our leaders, they don't have our consent, do they? And if we're not choosing our leaders and they're just charging ever higher taxes for us, that's taxation without representation. And in the little tiny brick schoolhouse I went to as a kid in New Hampshire, taxation without representation was a very legitimate reason to fire the government. Now, former House Speaker Dennis Hastert is back in court, and apparently one of his other sexual abuse victims may be called on to testify for the sentencing hearing. Now, Hastert pleaded guilty last October to a federal charge of structuring, which is evading bank reporting rules by withdrawing large amounts of cash in smaller increments. And he was using the money to basically pay somebody who was blackmailing him. It's amazing here. Alrighty, John Kerry is in Moscow. He's there to press the U.S. agenda for Syria, which is Assad must go. We will put in a new government. We've already picked them out. They've been in dress rehearsals for weeks. We're going to go. Now, following one of their meetings, Putin came out, all smiles, and said, quote, "We always welcome your visits since they are always conducted in a very business-like atmosphere and give a chance to advance in solving serious issues." He then went on to say, "We are really glad to see you because, all joking aside, as a rule, we managed to find some common ground and, leaning on this, move forward to address both bilateral and international issues." In other words, Putin said a great deal of nothing, and he said it very, very well. And my read is, Putin is being gracious in victory, because whatever Kerry thought he was going to get out of this meeting, Kerry did not get. Russia is not going to back down and let the U.S. go on in and launch a whole new invasion of Syria. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The State Department representative came on out and issued a statement: Syria's army should not liberate Palmyra from ISIS. Don't you dare do that. Don't you take that city from ISIS. Syria sent back a reply: do you want us to return it? Because they've already got it. They're in Palmyra. Over in Iraq, the Iraqi forces are advancing on Mosul. This proxy terrorist army created by the United States to smash up the Middle East and redraw the borders is failing miserably. So there are going to be more terror attacks so we can take the war against ISIS to the rest of the world. We're going to bomb Australia. We're going to bomb Pitcairn Island. They've got ISIS on Pitcairn Island, Easter Island. Those Moai are potential terrorists. I mean, it's reached a point of utter and complete absurdity. As that caller mentioned, Syrian troops, along with a Russia Today film crew, found a trove of ISIS Al-Qaeda documents detailing that, yes, Turkey was stealing Syria's oil, was being smuggled across the border and being sold. And weapons and support for the terrorists came back across. We'll be right back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to grab some phone calls real quick here. This caller is identified only as CC. Aloha, what's on your mind?
Hi, I'm a new person here to your show, so I'm just saying hi to everybody. I'm from the Deep South.
Okay.
I was hearing earlier that you guys were just briefly discussing the Gibson gun, and it was funny that you said that because my family, from my mother's side, actually created the Madsen gun before it became the Gatling gun.
Oh, really? That's an interesting bit of history.
Yep. So you're talking to an actual real NRA creator.
Oh, okay, well, fantabulous. You know, I remember back before this anti-gun hysteria got started, and I used to hang out with reenactors, and they had some of the recreated Gatling guns. They were set up to fire blanks, of course, but those were really cool.
Right. Yeah, here's a real history. The actual Madsen gun actually came from Denmark.
Okay.
And then the Gibson Gloucester, the Gibson gun after that, was created after the Madsen gun.
Okay. Well, thank you for that little bit of history, and please call in again. We're going to switch over here to Rob in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Just a quick question, and then your answer. How is it that you're able to keep all the information together? Like, you're looking at Hillary Clinton, and you're looking at the Trump race, and then, of course, Obama passing the thing with the NSA, and you're able to keep that all together. So I was looking for advice on how to keep track of what you're keeping track of.
Coffee. Lots and lots of Kona coffee.
All right. So Hawaiian coffee is the answer.
Well, it certainly helps a little bit here, but I've been doing this for 22 years, and you can't study the political system for 22 years without learning an awful lot about it. And, yes, I do keep an amazing amount of information stuffed into this brain. Some of it leaks out through the years. And I think if I have any gift at all, it's the ability to take very complex issues and distill them down into ways that are easy to understand, like the article on the 11th marble. But, there's a lot of information.
Right.
Okay?
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that.
All right, you got it. We're going to switch over to Lucky in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks. Just a couple quick things. First, I watched the entire address from Trump to AIPAC, and man, I mean, it was convincing to me. It may have been like it was pre-scripted. Maybe he was reading a teleprompter or something, but I mean, that thing was laid out like perfect, like so one-sided. But my other point was also, I saw some coverage. I don't have cable or anything. To tell you the truth, I get my news from your website. It's not like you wake up in the morning anymore and open the paper while you're having a coffee. I just kind of click on your website and at least check out the headlines to get a pretty good, current view of what's going on around the world. But I happened to be in an establishment last night where I was watching some CNN coverage of the Belgian terror attack, and they interviewed a doctor that was taking people in, to the hospital, and somebody else that had lost their loved one, apparently his wife or fiancé with a 1-year-old child. And the expression on these people's faces was the doctor looked happy. He had a smile on his face. The guy who lost somebody, like I said, his child.
Yeah.
And,
we saw the same thing at Sandy Hook, and it's but again, at this point, nobody's believing the official story, and as more people look, remember, propaganda isn't designed to fool critical analytical thinking. It's there to give people who don't want to think about things an excuse not to. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We're running out of time. I got a bunch of stuff I got to cover. We're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show so I can get back to the news because we're almost out of time on today's program. And I want to insert our usual segment on human-caused global warming. Insert ominous chord here. And there's a story that came out in The Independent over in Great Britain, warning that climate scientists are sounding the alarm over the superstorm climate shift. It can happen within decades, not centuries. Sea levels could rise 20 to 30 feet, blah, 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 blah. They've been talking about sea level rise and drowning the world's largest cities for years. It hasn't happened. As we reported earlier in the week, actual physical measurement of sea levels along the east coast of the United States show the sea level is dropping, which makes sense when you realize that the ice covers in Antarctica and Greenland are increasing, along with the Arctic ice cap. And you can almost sense the hysteria and panic in all these people who sold their souls and their principles and their reputation for this hoax of human-caused global warming in exchange for generous funding to prove humans were warming the earth so we could be convinced to pay a carbon tax and let some government agency decide for us how we will live our lives. And it's ridiculous for the Independent to come out with this story right now. The U.S. is getting slammed in a blizzard reaching from Denver to Michigan in spring 1 week from April. I'm getting pictures from readers and listeners who are living in those areas. And there's some serious snow out there. It's not just a light dusting that comes at night and it's evaporated by noon the next day. Denver is digging out from their blizzards. The roads have iced over. Schools have been closed. They've got widespread power outages. Another report on the same thing from the watchers at WhatReallyHappened. Major winter storm underway from Central Rockies to High Plains, U.S. Now remember, all this caterwauling about global warming is based on fraud. There was this huge scandal, ClimateGate, where somebody leaked internal emails and source code for computer programs from the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, which proved their goal was to sell this illusion the world was getting warmer. Hide the decline. By the way, there's a group called Minnesotans for Global Warming. They put out these very funny videos. Look for them on YouTube. I'll put some of them up here. And, of course, they're still raising on a busted flush. NOAA, a little earlier in the year, came out with this report that 2015 was the hottest year on record. And they had a very impressive chart showing the temperature soaring up. And NOAA got in hot water to the point where the Congress is starting an investigation because they basically went, back just a few years to get a warming trend. And if they'd gone all the way back 58 years, it would have shown there's been no warming. Because they went back 37 years to get the data they wanted, the world is getting warmer. But from before that, the world had been cooling. They cherry-pick the data. This isn't science. This is a political agenda at work. This is how politicians operate. They create a crisis out of thin air, and they'll offer to sell you a solution to it in exchange for money and obedience and the lives of your children. The climate is changing. Newsflash, the climate always changes. It always has. It always will. Humans have virtually nothing to do with it. Climate on Earth is dominated by solar output, which is in a period of decline, and the changing shape of Earth's orbit, which goes from round to elliptical and back again over very, very long cycles. And when it's elliptical, you get the ice ages, and when it's round, circular, you get the interglacials, which is what we're in right now. So that's how government works. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. Oh, my goodness, ISIS is coming to get you. Give us your money, and the lives of your children will protect you. That's how they work. That's how they've always worked. Now, yesterday we were talking about how there are now more U.S. soldiers back on the ground in Iraq than had previously been admitted to. Now the Pentagon is saying they're just there to defend the oil fields. They're not going to get into... They're just there to defend the oil fields. Really, shouldn't Iraq be doing that? We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Thursday, and a little disappointing news. The lovely Lady Claire will not be joining us in the third hour tomorrow because of Good Friday festivities at her church, but she'll be back in the very, very near future. And I know you're all going to miss her, and I'm going to get all this email about, we want more Lady Claire. So do I. No surprise there. Now, getting on back to the airplane we all love to hate, the F-35, the latest huge embarrassment in what is now the world's most expensive weapons program is due to faulty software. It will be at least 2019 before the aircraft is close to being operational. What, did they contract the same people who did the Obamacare website? And apparently, according to Michael Gilmore, who's the Pentagon's Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, the latest F-35 operating system 10, has 931 open documented deficiencies, 158 of which are Category 1. Those that could cause death, severe injury, or severe illness. Loss of the pilot, loss of the aircraft. You ever stop to think that maybe we've allowed our technology to become too complex? Because that carries a risk. Because it's one thing when you have a healthy economy and you can support bloated technology. But when things start to tighten and you can't maintain what you've already built, you are in trouble. Ancient Rome is a good example of that. Rome invented a lot of wonderful things. Concrete, the roads, viniculture, aqueducts. But as Rome began to decline, as it began to sink into hopelessly unpayable debt, and all of the wealth of the empire was going to the money lenders, and they didn't have enough left over to take care of and maintain their aqueducts, their roads, their bridges, their nuclear reactors. Hint, hint, hint. And that's when Rome began to fall, because they had become dependent on that infrastructure, and the infrastructure just wasn't there anymore. There are a lot of parallels between the current United States empire and the Roman Empire in terms of its decline and fall. Alrighty, let's see. Over in Yemen, the United Nations seems to have brokered a deal between the people of Yemen and the installed puppet government. They're going to have a ceasefire starting on April 10th, and then they're going to sit down and see if they can work out some kind of an agreement. I don't think the U.S. government wants for there to be peace in Yemen. They want their puppet government in control and the Yemenite people to sit down and shut up, because that's your place in this world here. U.S. backing Saudi-led war crimes against the civilians in Yemen. This is out of Blacklisted News. And they're talking about this mass airstrike that left 200 people dead. And the U.S. government's excuses, they're all terrorists. We're sure they were all terrorists. Or if they weren't before, they certainly will be now. Now, do you remember Rick Prince, the guy who founded Blackwater? And he's the current chairman of Frontier Services Group. So Blackwater has to go out of business and reform and rename. It was Academy and then C, and now it's Frontier Services Group. Apparently, he's now under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice and other federal agencies for attempting to broker military services to foreign governments that the U.S. government didn't approve of, apparently, along with money laundering. So, looks like he may be in a little bit of trouble. And apparently a big part of the problem was Prince's relationship with Chinese intelligence. Here we have the go-to guy for the mercenaries to go on out and conduct covert U.S. foreign policy in other countries, and he's all buddy-buddy with the Chinese intelligence people. Okay, so story coming out of thedailybell.com. Tony Blair is out there on the warpath against flabby liberalism, and he's on the warpath against the Brexit, the Frexit, the Drexit, the Grexit, Grexit version 2. And he says there needs to be a tougher center-ground approach to dealing with terrorism and dealing with the refugee crisis. Now, what he's actually saying is, and he's using this terror attack, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, to scare the member states of the European Union into dropping their dreams of exit. And he's talking about the individual member states of the European Union surrendering their sovereignty and letting Brussels run the entire European Union as the United States of Europe. That's the push. The globalists are just trying to merge everything together. One planet, one population of slaves, one global private central bank. That's their dream. And they've run into serious trouble because of the friction the refugees are causing as they blend in to try and blend the population. Amber Rudd, Britain's energy minister, is on the hot seat because she issued a claim that Brexit will send household energy bills soaring and hand power to Vladimir Putin. I think the British people are probably smart enough to realize they're being lied to, almost to the same extent we are. Over in Atlantic City, they're dealing with bankruptcy. They're going to start paying their police officers and firefighters with IOUs. Now, there's a problem with that. California tried that a while back, paying city services with IOUs. The banks wouldn't take them. And for good reason. If Atlantic City is bankrupt and they're issuing IOUs, under what circumstance are they ever going to be able to redeem those IOUs? It's starting to really come apart. Now, private equity fund Starboard Value LP has launched a proxy fight to completely replace the entire board of media company Yahoo, including the company's CEO, Marissa Mayer. They've had 4 years of Yahoo's numbers going down. Everybody's numbers are going down. And now the hedge fund is basically saying, well, we're going to come on in. We're going to put our own management in. And all the original Yahooers are going to be out, and we can do a better job, maybe, maybe, maybe. Now, over in Minnesota, they've hit a little bit of a problem. The MNsure's health care systems, part of Obamacare, has had a major snafu. They're not able to get these 1095A tax forms to their own people. Now, this is the form that you get when you buy an Obamacare-compliant health insurance policy to prove that you have the health insurance. And the forms were supposed to go out January 31st. They still can't get them all out. These people are going to have to file for tax extensions. And if they never get the forms, they're going to be paying these high costs on these Obamacare policies, dealing with the high deductibles, and get hit with the IRS fine. It's another wonderful way in which Obamacare proves what a smashing success it has been. Meanwhile, over in Colorado, there is an initiative going onto the ballot in November to mandate a statewide single-payer health care system. Now, if approved by the voters, Colorado Care would cover every resident, regardless of employment or ability to pay. And last October, they got enough signatures to get the amendment on the ballot. And the Koch brothers are out there with their lawyers trying to find a way to kill this thing, because there's much more money to be made off of the current system than a single-payer system whose agenda is actually taking care of the people. There's no money to be made taking care of the people. Lots of money to be made pretending to take care of the people. Meanwhile, the Federal Appeals Court that is looking into the Internal Revenue Service targeting of various Tea Party groups, the judge, Raymond Kethledge, has apparently run out of patience and was yelling at the IRS's lawyers, as much as court decorum allows yelling. And I guess it's reached the point where even the federal judge is saying, this is just ridiculous, the stonewalling going on. Now, somebody sent me this article. Oh, there's the music. I'll have to leave this until tomorrow. It will be fascinating. Trust me, tune in. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I think I'm going to take the Lady Claire to lunch. And we'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.